Hi everybody, welcome to day one, our first day of week 5, our last week with our unit New York City, a City of Immigrants. Week 5 is a little bit different because throughout the week you're going to be creating a project to be submitted to the Tenement Museum's website. The project is called Your Story, Our Story, and you might remember that earlier in this unit we had gone to the website to research, look at images of objects and artifacts that were important to people's stories of immigration. By the end of this week, you will have created your own submission to be published on the website. Teachers, week 5 has some special considerations, so we're going to review those quickly before starting the lesson. The first is that this week includes more group and collaborative work. And although today, day 1, can be done independently, before day 2, the next session, you may want to have your students divided into groups of 2 or 3. The second consideration is that this week also includes more self-assessment. There's going to be a checklist that students use in this lesson that will be used throughout week 5. The last consideration is specifically about day 1, which is that students are going to be taking their work from weeks 1 through 4 and combining it into one document for today. We're going to show you right now some suggestions of how to structure this to be as seamless and simple as possible for students in a virtual or remote setting, although it might be different based on how you designed your assignments leading up to week 5. So one option is to create a Google Doc, the other a Google Slide presentation based on whichever is easiest for your students to use. You can also assign this in a Google Classroom assignment so that each student is assigned their own copy. In whichever format you choose, you may want to have links directly back to their work from the previous week so that students don't have to go and try to find that. So for example, you could embed a link straight to a slide deck if that's what students used. And if you did this with the slide decks from weeks 1 through 4, you can also let students know they're going to find the writing on this yellow slide with the word project in the title. This is what they'll be transferring from their old assignments into today's document. If it's too cumbersome to find the link for each student's individual assignment from the previous weeks, you could also embed a link that goes to the actual Google Classroom assignment. Students can then be directed to the Google Classroom assignment, open their attachment from before, and then transfer that information. Let's quickly go over what we're going to do for the session and then we can start. First, we will talk about our essential question and our lesson objectives. Then we will have a review activity of what we had done in weeks 1 through 4. Then we'll talk about today's task and set the purpose. After we compile our writing from before, we're going to do a self-editing exercise. And then finally, teachers, you'll close with a closing and connecting activity. And as usual, you can choose from any of these 4 options, whichever activity would be the best fit for you and your students. And remember, as usual, below, you have your notes for teachers with some extra suggestions for how to implement today's lesson. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, we are on day 1, our first day of week 5, which is our last week with our unit, New York City, a City of Immigrants. And our essential question for today is, how do our stories connect to the past? How do our stories connect to the past? At this point, we'll ask that a student reads aloud our lesson objectives below in the pink box. Teachers, you can pause this video and give students some time to read those lesson objectives out loud. Okay, thank you for reading aloud our lesson objectives. The first one is to demonstrate independence in editing writing for clarity and expression. Our second, to demonstrate command of writing conventions. And the third, to develop personal narratives that are well structured and include details that showcase the author's connections to the topic. So our language focus for this session is going to be writing personal narratives about our unique special stories and making sure that we use conventions like spelling, capitalization, and punctuation to make our writing clear and flow well. For our review, we're going to discuss what we did in weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we have a prompt here that says, how did the artifact help you tell your story? Before we respond to that, we're going again to revisit what we did in weeks 1 through 4. In week 1, we did an artifact selection and wrote some details about an artifact special to our family's story. In week 2, we added more details and elaborated on the importance of that artifact. In week 3, we conducted interviews with family members to find more information about our family's history. And finally, in week 4, we wrote everything together into the story of our family's immigration to the U.S. and about our current lives in New York City. At this point, let's revisit our prompt. How did the artifact help you tell your story? If you need some help getting started with this prompt, you can use our sentence starter here. My artifact helped me tell my story by. As usual, we'll do an example. So for mine, if you remember, my artifact was the hamsa, the hand decoration. My artifact, the hamsa, helped me tell my story by showing 2 diverse parts of my identity. So at this point, teachers, you can pause this video, and students, you'll take some time to respond to this prompt here. How did the artifact help you tell your story? And if you get stuck, you can use the sentence starter in this green box. Okay, thank you for responding and participating in our review activity. Let's go to the first steps for putting together today's project. So here are the 4 things we're going to do for today's activity. The first is to gather the components from weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to either use a document our teacher already created or start a new document, and later we're going to be editing and revising the information we put into this document. We're also going to give it a name, and we're going to put in all of the different parts of the project that we'd already done in weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4. Finally, we're going to use a checklist to edit our writing and then share the doc with a teacher and a partner. Let's set the purpose before we begin. Writing personal narratives is an opportunity to develop your voice as an author. Knowing how to include key details and structures will make your writing stand out. Your personal narrative is your own special, unique story. Make sure to try to add your own personality, your style, your voice, and all the interesting information that makes your story unique to you. Okay, now I'm going to show you exactly how you might be able to transfer some of your writing from the previous weeks into your new document. Of course, this will be based on what teachers decide to design for today's session. But for example, if you're using a Google Doc, you want to create maybe a space. And let's say that I want to get my writing from week 2. I'll label that week 2. I'll have my assignment open. And again, on this yellow slide, I have my writing from before. So I can copy and paste my writing here, right into my doc. If I'm using a Google slide presentation, I might go to a separate slide for week 2. And again, paste and resize it to fit on that slide. At this point, let's talk about the editing checklist, because once we have our writing compiled, we're going to edit to revise or change anything. In the editing checklist, you're going to find the different categories of writing here, and the checklist items are what you're expected to do to go through the editing process. Let's do, for example, capital letters, and we're going to check to make sure that capital letters, that is uppercase letters, are at the beginning of every sentence. So I'm going to return to my writing here and see if that is the case. This is the picture of my artifact hamsa, hand decorations. They belong to me, they came from my mother, and they mean protection against evil. So here I can see I have the start of a new sentence. I have a period here, and then a new sentence starts. So I need to change that to a capital letter. And then here as well, I have a period and the start of a new sentence. So I'm going to change that, edit it to make that capital. So now that I know that I have completed that part of the editing, go back to my checklist, and the best part, check it off. Teachers, to implement this, you might want to copy and paste the editing checklist into the document so that students have it right there. So let's go ahead and get started creating our new documents, adding in our project components, and then doing our self-editing process.